Something unusual is happening between two countries that are supposed to be allies, Spain and the United States. For decades they have worked together through NATO, trade agreements, and military cooperation. But suddenly, headlines across Spain are asking a shocking question. Could the United States actually cut off trade with Spain? It sounds unbelievable. After all, Spain is not Iran, not North Korea, not Russia. It is a NATO member and part of the European Union. Yet recent comments from former U.S. President Donald Trump have triggered a political storm in Spain, because Trump suggested something rarely heard between allies, an embargo. So what is really happening here? Is this just political rhetoric, or could relations between the U.S. and Spain actually be entering a dangerous new phase? To understand the situation, we need to look at the bigger geopolitical picture. The current tension revolves around the Middle East conflict. The United States and Israel have taken aggressive military positions against Iran, but Spain's government has taken a very different stance. Instead of supporting military action, Spain's leadership has publicly emphasized a position summarized in 3 simple words: no to war. Spain has also reportedly refused to allow certain U.S. military operations to be launched from Spanish territory. And that decision matters more than it might seem, because Spain hosts 2 extremely important military bases used by the United States. One of them is the naval base at Rota, located in southern Spain. The other is Moron Air Base near Seville. These bases have been part of U.S. military strategy in Europe and the Mediterranean for decades. Their origins go back to the Cold War, when the United States and Spain signed agreements allowing American forces to operate from Spanish soil. For Washington, these bases are strategically valuable. For Spain, they symbolize a long-standing security partnership, but now that partnership appears to be under pressure. During a recent meeting at the White House, Donald Trump delivered remarks that quickly made headlines in Spain. He criticized Spain's refusal to support U.S. operations related to Iran. And then he went further. Trump suggested the United States could cut off trade with Spain. In his words, the U.S. could stop all business related to Spain. He even mentioned the possibility of imposing trade embargoes. For many people in Spain, that statement sounded alarming, because historically, U.S. embargoes have only been imposed on countries considered adversaries. Countries like Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Syria, Russia, Venezuela. So the idea that Spain, a NATO ally, could even be mentioned in the same context surprised many observers. But what does a trade embargo actually involve? In simple terms, it means restricting or prohibiting economic exchange between countries. That could include banning imports, blocking exports, restricting financial transactions, limiting investment in practice. It would mean American companies could no longer buy Spanish products or sell goods and services to Spain. For an economy like Spain's, which depends heavily on international trade, such measures could create serious economic disruption. However, there is a major complication. Spain is not acting alone. Spain is part of the European Union, and that changes everything. Trade policy for EU countries is largely coordinated through the European Union. This means the United States cannot easily impose a targeted embargo against one EU member without affecting the entire EU trade relationship. And the EU is one of the United States' largest economic partners. That makes the situation far more complex than a simple political threat. Many analysts believe that even if Trump wanted to impose an embargo on Spain, doing so would trigger major legal and diplomatic challenges. In other words, the idea may be politically dramatic but economically difficult to implement. Spain's government has responded firmly. Officials emphasize that Spain remains a committed NATO member and an important contributor to European defense. They also highlight Spain's role as a global trading nation. Spanish exports reach nearly 200 countries worldwide, including the United States. In other words, the relationship between Spain and the U.S. is not one-sided. Both economies benefit from cooperation, and both countries have decades of diplomatic history. Because of this, many Spanish leaders believe the threat of a full embargo is unlikely to materialize. So what is really driving this tension? Many analysts point to a broader disagreement within NATO. For years, the United States, especially under Trump, has pressured NATO members to increase defense spending. Trump has repeatedly demanded that allies spend up to 5% of GDP on defense. Spain currently spends significantly less than that. This issue has been a recurring source of friction between Washington and Madrid. And the current Middle East crisis appears to have intensified those disagreements. At the moment, this situation remains largely rhetorical. No official trade embargo has been implemented, and given the legal and diplomatic complexities involved, many experts believe it is unlikely to happen. However, the episode reveals something important. Even long-standing alliances can experience sudden tension when geopolitical priorities diverge. The real question now is whether this disagreement will fade away or grow into something larger. Because in international politics, today's rhetoric sometimes becomes tomorrow's policy. So what do you think? Is this just political theater, or the beginning of a deeper conflict between two allies? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.